You're a disgrace to this family. Clem's words hit me like a slap, sharp and unforgiving, cutting through the heavy air at the funeral reception. Her face was twisted with fury, and her voice dripped with disdain. Around us, the rest of the family exchanged uncomfortable glances, clearly wishing they could vanish. I stood frozen, stunned by her attack. "How dare you cry like that at Dad's funeral? You're embarrassing all of us," she hissed, her fingers curling into my arm like claws. I wrenched myself free, my own anger bubbling to the surface. "He was our father, Clem. Aren't we supposed to grieve?" "Please, girls," our mother Lydia interjected, her voice trembling and frail. "Not here, not now." But Clem wasn't ready to back down. "Oh, look at you, always playing the perfect daughter," she sneered. "Well, guess what? Dad's gone now, and your little act means nothing. My name is Amity." And that was the moment my world began to unravel, right there, as we mourned my father. I clenched the letter in my pocket, the last thing he'd written to me before his sudden death. It was meant to guide me as I prepared for the family I was starting. Now, it felt like a cruel reminder of everything I'd lost. "You don't know what you're talking about," I replied, struggling to keep my voice steady. "Dad loved us both." Clem let out a bitter laugh. "Oh, please. We both know who his favorite was." My husband Marlon stepped between us, his voice firm. "That's enough, Clem. This isn't the time or place." She turned her icy glare on him. "Stay out of this, Marlon. You're not even real family." I saw the hurt flash across his face, and something inside me snapped. "Don't you dare speak to him like that." I shot back. "Just because your marriage is falling apart doesn't mean you can take it out on us." The room fell silent, tension crackling like electricity. Clem's husband Silas, who had been scrolling on his phone, suddenly looked up, clearly intrigued by the drama. Clem's voice dropped to a low, dangerous tone. "What did you just say?" Before I could answer, the sound of someone clearing their throat broke through the charged silence. We turned to see Dad's lawyer, Mr. Finch, standing in the doorway. His eyes flicked between Clem and me, uneasy but professional. "I'm sorry to interrupt," he said, "but it's time for the reading of the will." The atmosphere shifted immediately. Clem's anger seemed to dissolve, replaced by a glint of greed in her eyes. "Finally," she muttered, already striding toward Dad's study. My stomach twisted into knots. This wasn't how it was supposed to be. We should have been sharing stories about Dad, about his warmth, his humor, his love. Instead, we were about to descend into a fight over his possessions. As we gathered in the study, Mr. Finch seated himself behind Dad's large desk, a thick envelope resting in his hands. "Before I begin," he said, his voice calm but firm, "I want to remind you all that Reed was a man of many complexities. His choices may not make sense to us, but they were his wishes, and they must be respected." Clem rolled her eyes, so dramatically it was a wonder they didn't fall out of her head. My heart sank. Whatever was in that envelope, I could feel it coming. It was going to change everything. "Let's just get on with it," Clem snapped. "Some of us have real lives to get back to." Mr. Finch gave a small nod and carefully broke the seal. As he started to read, I found myself tuning out, my hand instinctively moving to my stomach. My thoughts were with Dad, wishing he could have met the child I was carrying, wishing he were here to guide us through this chaos. But as Mr. Finch's words droned on, one detail caught my attention. He mentioned a piece of land with a cabin in disrepair. My ears perked up. Maybe, just maybe, Dad had found a way to guide us after all. The property located at 1852 Willow Creek Road, including all buildings and contents, is to be left to Amity, Mr. Finch announced. Clem's head jerked up, her eyes narrowing. "What? That old dump? Why on earth would she get that?" I vaguely remembered the cabin, a secluded place Dad would escape to, though he never brought us there. He always insisted it wasn't ready for guests. Mr. Finch continued reading. "The remaining liquid assets will be divided equally between Clementine and Amity." Clem's demeanor shifted instantly, her eyes sparkling with renewed interest. "Now we're talking. So, How much is that exactly? When Mr. Finch revealed the amount, a wave of unease swept over me. It was far less than anyone had anticipated. Clem's reaction was immediate and explosive. That's it? Are you kidding me? There has to be more. Where's the rest of it? Adjusting his glasses, Mr. Finch maintained his composure. I'm afraid that's all, Miss Clementine. Your father's medical expenses and a series of recent withdrawals have significantly reduced the estate. Clem rounded on me, her face flushed with fury. This is your fault somehow. You were always his favorite. Did you manipulate him into giving you more behind my back? That's enough. Mom's voice rang out, sharp and resolute. Your father worked hard for everything he had, and it's not our place to question his choices. But Clem was too enraged to hear reason. She stormed over to the desk and snatched the documents. I want to see those withdrawal records, she demanded, her eyes scanning the pages. There's no way Dad spent that much money. As Clem pored over the papers, muttering furiously, I found myself drawn to the thought of the cabin. What secrets had it held for Dad? Why had he entrusted it to me? Clem, I began hesitantly. The cabin might still have value. Maybe we could sell it and split the— Don't be ridiculous, she interrupted with a scoff. That decrepit shack? You can keep it. I'll take my share in cash. Thank you very much. Her husband Silas, who had been quietly observing, finally stepped forward, placing a hand on her shoulder. Darling, maybe we should discuss this privately. There could be more to consider. Clem shrugged him off, her tone icy. There's nothing to discuss. I'll take what's rightfully mine, and that's final. An awkward silence settled over the room. I glanced at Marlon, and he gave me a reassuring nod of support. Mr. Finch, I asked, trying to steady my voice, is there anything else? Any instructions or messages from Dad? The lawyer paused briefly before pulling another envelope from his briefcase. Actually, there is one more item, a letter addressed to both of you. He extended it toward us. Before I could take it, Clem snatched it out of his hand. She ripped the envelope open, scanning the contents quickly. Her expression soured, and she let out a bitter laugh. Unbelievable. Just more of Dad's sentimental nonsense. She crumpled the paper and tossed it aside. I hurried to retrieve it, carefully smoothing out the creases. My breath caught as I recognized Dad's handwriting, each word bringing a lump to my throat. My dear girls, I hope you'll forgive an old man's secrets. The true worth of what I've left you isn't in money or property. It's in the lessons I hope you've learned and the love I know you're capable of sharing. Amity, the cabin contains more than what you see on the surface. Clem, your strength has always been both your greatest gift and your greatest challenge. I hope you both find what you truly need. With all my love, Dad. I lowered the letter, my chest tight with emotion, just as Clem began gathering her things. Her expression was set, her voice sharp. I'm taking my share and leaving, she declared. Silas, let's go. Without another word, they strode out, leaving a heavy silence in their wake. Clutching Dad's letter close, I couldn't shake the feeling that whatever secrets the cabin held, they were meant for me to uncover, not just for my sake, but for the family he'd left behind. Broken as we were, I knew we weren't beyond hope. Mom reached out, her hand gently squeezing mine. Are you okay, sweetheart? She asked softly. I nodded, though my thoughts were already miles away. I think I need to see the cabin, I said quietly, determination building with each passing moment. The gravel crunched beneath the car tires as Marlon and I pulled up to the cabin. Time had not been kind to the place. The weathered wood, sagging roof, and peeling shutters all spoke of years of neglect and abandonment. Marlon glanced at the structure warily. Are you sure about this, Amity? I met his eyes, my resolve unwavering. Dad left this to me for a reason. I need to find out why. The front door groaned on its rusted hinges as I pushed it open, the paint flaking away under my hand. The key Mr. Finch had provided had struggled to turn in the lock, as if the house itself resisted being opened. Inside, a layer of dust coated every surface. and the air was heavy with the smell of age and forgotten memories. Furniture stood covered in sheets, their ghostly forms casting long shadows in the dim light filtering through dirty windows. As I wandered through the rooms, my fingers trailed along the walls and furniture, searching for something I couldn't yet name. The cabin felt like it was holding its breath, waiting for me to discover what it had been keeping hidden. "Amity, come look at this," Marlon called from another room. I followed his voice to the study, where he stood examining a large desk. It seemed strangely out of place compared to the rest of the cabin, newer and better preserved. "Something's off about this desk," he said thoughtfully, tapping its surface. "It sounds hollow in some spots." For the next hour, we searched the desk, running our hands along its edges and panels, looking for any hidden compartments. Just when I was about to give up, my fingers brushed against a small, almost imperceptible indentation under the writing surface. With a soft click, a hidden panel slid open. "Oh my God," I whispered, my breath catching as I reached into the hidden compartment. Inside was a stack of yellowed letters and a folded piece of paper that looked like a map. My hands trembled as I carefully unfolded the first letter. "My dearest Amity," it began in Dad's familiar handwriting. "If you're reading this, it means I've failed in my greatest hope to mend the rift in our family. But perhaps, through you, there's still a chance." Tears blurred my eyes as I continued reading. Dad spoke of his regrets, the mistakes he felt he'd made while raising Clem and me. He wrote about a dream he had for us, a legacy that was far more meaningful than money or possessions. "The map will lead you to what truly matters," the letter concluded. "Trust your heart, my little peacemaker. You've always known the way." Marlon's hand squeezed my shoulder gently. "What's next?" he asked, his voice steady and supportive. I glanced at the map, then back at him. "We follow it," I said firmly. "Whatever Dad left for us, he wanted me to find it." We spent the rest of the day searching the property, guided by the map. The sun dipped lower in the sky, its fading light casting long shadows over the overgrown fields behind the cabin. As we moved through the tall grass, something caught my eye, a faint glint in the sunlight. My heart raced as I hurried over, dropping to my knees to dig with my bare hands. Marlon joined me, and together we unearthed a metal box, its edges rusted but still intact. My fingers shook as I pried it open. Inside, we found a journal and a bundle of old photographs. As I lifted the journal, a slip of paper fluttered to the ground. It was a bank statement for an account I'd never known about, the balance so large it made my head spin. "This can't be real," I muttered, showing Marlon the paper. As I flipped through the journal, the pieces of the puzzle began to fall into place. Dad had been quietly building this fund for years, setting aside portions of his income and investments. But it wasn't meant for himself, or even for Clem and me. It was meant to establish a foundation, one dedicated to helping families in crisis. He wanted to make a difference, I said, my voice thick with emotion. To leave the world better than he found it. Marlon wrapped an arm around me, his presence grounding me in the moment. "And now he's left that dream in your hands." As the weight of the discovery sank in, I felt both awe and an overwhelming sense of responsibility. This wasn't just an inheritance. It was a chance to fulfill Dad's vision, to build something meaningful, and maybe even to heal the fractures in our family. But as I held the journal close, a chill ran down my spine. What would Clem do when she found out about this? The sister who had stormed out, furious and convinced she'd been cheated, now stood to lose much more than she realized. I turned to Marlon, seeing the same determination reflected in his eyes that I felt in my own. "We need to handle this the right way," I said. "For Dad, for the family, for everything he believed in." Little did I know, this was only the beginning. The real challenge was still to come. The morning sunlight streamed through the cabin's dusty windows as I pored over Dad's journal. Each page revealed new layers of a man I thought I'd known, painting a portrait far more intricate and profound than the father I remembered. "Amity," Marlon called from the kitchen, his voice laced with concern. "You need to eat something." I waved him off, My focus locked on the journal in front of me. The entries chronicled years of secret generosity, anonymous donations, quiet acts of kindness, and the slow, deliberate building of a vision for a foundation that could change countless lives. I had no idea, I murmured, running my fingers over the faded ink of Dad's handwriting. All those business trips, those late nights, he was creating this dream the whole time. Marlon came to sit beside me, sliding a plate of toast onto the table. "Your father was an extraordinary man," he said gently. "But, Amity, we need to think about what happens next." I glanced up at him. His concern mirrored in his eyes. "What do you mean?" "This inheritance, the foundation, it's a lot to handle. And then there's Clem to think about." The mention of my sister sent a shiver through me. "She can't find out about this." "Not yet. You saw how she acted during the will reading." Marlon exhaled heavily, his expression conflicted. "We can't hide it from her forever. She's still your sister, whether we like it or not." Before I could respond, my phone buzzed with a message from Mom. "Clem's been asking questions about the cabin." "Be careful, sweetheart." My pulse quickened. "We have to protect this," I said, standing abruptly. "If Clem gets wind of what's here before we're ready." We spent the next few hours meticulously cataloging everything we found: documents, keepsakes, heirlooms. As I photographed an antique locket, something caught my eye. "Marlon, look at this," I said, holding the locket up to the light. Inside was a faint inscription that I almost missed. "To my dearest Evelyn, my heart is yours always." Marlon's brow furrowed. "I thought your grandmother's name was Margaret." A distant memory surfaced, an overheard conversation, hushed and strained. My mother's tearful voice echoed in my mind. "You can't keep hiding her, Reed. She deserves to know the truth." My hands shook as I flipped through the journal, searching for answers. Near the back, tucked between the pages, was a loose sheet covered in Dad's hurried handwriting. "My darling girls," it read. "There's so much I should have told you. Evelyn was my first love, long before I met your mother. The choices I made then shaped our family in ways you cannot imagine. I pray you'll forgive me when the truth comes to light." I stared at the letter, my breath catching in my throat. "Oh my God," I whispered, looking up at Marlon. "This isn't just about money. Dad was hiding something, someone all this time." Marlon was about to reply when the sound of tires crunching on gravel outside froze us both. Through the window, I saw a familiar car pulling up. "It's Clem," I said, panic gripping my chest. "Quick, hide everything." We scrambled to conceal the documents and heirlooms just as footsteps approached the cabin. The door flew open, slamming against the wall. There stood Clem, her face a storm of fury. "Well, well," Clem sneered as she stepped into the room, her eyes narrowing at the sight of me. "Looks like little sister's been busy. Find anything interesting in Daddy's little hideaway?" I straightened my shoulders, forcing myself to remain calm. "Clem, this isn't what you think. There's so much we need to talk about." "Save it," she snapped, cutting me off. "I know you're hiding something, and I'm not leaving until I get what's rightfully mine." Her gaze darted around the room, searching for evidence, her desperation almost tangible. The weight of Dad's secrets felt heavier than ever. How was I supposed to protect his legacy, uncover the truth about the past, and somehow find a way to mend the rift between us? Everything I needed was here in the cabin, but Clem's presence made it clear that time was running out. If I didn't act quickly, the fragile remains of our family could shatter beyond repair. Clem's voice sharpened as her eyes landed on the table. "Where is it, Amity? I know Dad left something valuable here." I stayed firm, though my heart pounded in my chest. "Clem, please, let's talk this through like adults." Her laugh was bitter, filled with years of resentment. "Talk? Oh, now you want to talk. You've been hiding things from me, haven't you?" Her attention fell on the journal I had managed to hide in time. "What's that?" Before I could stop her, she lunged forward and grabbed it, flipping through the pages. Her face changed as the words sank in, her eyes widening with every revelation. A foundation? Secret accounts. Her voice rose in disbelief, anger bubbling to the surface. You lying little snake. How long were you planning to keep this from me? Marlon stepped between us, his tone calm but firm. Clem, you're misunderstanding. We only just found out about this ourselves. She shoved him aside, focusing all her fury on me. Don't try to play innocent, Amity. How much did Dad leave? What are you hiding? The tension in the room was suffocating. I took a deep breath, knowing this confrontation was inevitable. It's not about the money, Clem. This isn't some inheritance for us to fight over. Dad had a vision, dreams for this fortune. He wanted to use it to help people, to make a real difference. Her laugh was cold and cutting.
Oh.
Spare me the lecture, Miss Perfect. You always were Dad's favorite, weren't you? But I have dreams too. Dreams that require money. Money that's supposed to be mine, too. Her words stung, but I held my ground. I'm sorry you're struggling, Clem, but Dad didn't leave this to us for personal gain. He wanted to build something bigger than our family drama. Bigger than us? Clem's voice cracked with anger. What about family, Amity? What about taking care of your own sister? Isn't that what Dad would have wanted? Her hypocrisy wasn't lost on me, and my frustration boiled over. Family? You haven't acted like family in years, Clem. Where were you when Dad was sick? When Mom needed help? Her face flushed red with fury, her voice trembling. Don't you dare judge me. You have no idea what I've been through, or what I'm dealing with right now. The room felt like it might collapse under the weight of her anger and my exhaustion. Somewhere beneath the tension, I knew there had to be a way forward. But at that moment, it seemed impossible to find. Something in Clem's tone stopped me cold. What do you mean, Clem? Are you in trouble? For a brief moment, her expression softened, a flicker of vulnerability breaking through her anger. But just as quickly, her walls went back up. That's none of your concern. What matters is I need that money, and you're going to give me my fair share. Marlon stepped in, his voice calm but firm. Clem, it's not that simple. We can't just hand over the money. There are legal considerations, not to mention ethical ones. Ethical? Clem scoffed, her laugh sharp and biting. Since when do you care about ethics, Marlon? Or should I fill Amity in on your little secret from college? I saw Marlon freeze, his face draining of color. What are you talking about? He asked, his voice taut. Clem's smile was cruel, her words dripping with venom. Oh, you know exactly what I'm talking about. The reason you transferred schools. The real reason your family doesn't speak to you anymore. The air in the room grew heavy, the tension almost unbearable. I looked between my husband and my sister, my stomach churning. It felt like the ground beneath me was shifting, unstable and uncertain. Marlon, I whispered, desperately searching his face for an explanation. He avoided my gaze, his voice low and strained. Amity, it's complicated. I didn't mean for. Spare us the excuses. Clem cut him off with a sneer. Here's what's going to happen. You're going to give me half of whatever Dad left. Or I start airing all the dirty little secrets this family's been hiding, starting with golden boy Marlon over here. Her threat hung in the air, suffocating and final. I felt torn apart, caught between honoring my father's legacy and trying to keep the fragile pieces of my family from falling apart entirely. You have 24 hours to decide, Clem added as she headed for the door. Choose wisely, little sister. The door slammed shut behind her, leaving a silence that was deafening. I sank into a chair, my thoughts racing. The cabin, which had once felt like a place of refuge, now seemed oppressive, filled with shadows, secrets, and lies. Marlon reached out to touch my arm, but I pulled away. Don't, I said softly, my voice barely audible. Not now. Amity, please, he said, his tone pleading. We need to talk about this. We will, I replied, my voice steadier now. But right now, I need to figure out how to save Dad's dream without letting this family tear itself apart. The weight of Clem's ultimatum pressed down on me like a storm cloud, suffocating and inescapable. I realized then that uncovering Dad's secrets had only been the first step. The real challenge was navigating the wreckage of the present, finding a way to honor my father's vision while confronting the fractures in our family. This wasn't just about the past anymore. It was about the future. And I had no idea if any of us could survive it. The tension in the cabin was unbearable. Marlon paced back and forth while I sat at the table, Dad's journal lying open in front of me. Clem's ultimatum echoed in my mind like a ticking bomb, threatening to destroy the fragile remains of our family. Amity, Marlon said, his voice tight with strain. We need to talk about what Clem said. I looked up, searching his face for any sign of the man I thought I knew. You're right. We do. What secret was she talking about? Marlon? What happened in college? He dropped into a chair, burying his face in his hands. After a moment, he looked up, guilt etched into his features. It was a long time ago. I made a terrible mistake. As Marlon spoke, the story unfolded like something out of a nightmare. A drunken night, a reckless decision, a car accident, and a passenger he left behind. He recounted how he fled the scene, consumed by panic, and later transferred schools to escape the consequences and bury the guilt. His voice shook as he admitted the truth, the weight of it pressing down on him. I've carried this with me for years, he said, his eyes full of desperation. I never wanted to hide it from you, but I was so afraid. Afraid of losing you, of destroying everything we've built. The words hit me like a physical blow. I stood abruptly, needing air, needing space. How could you? I whispered, my voice shaking. After all these years, you never told me? Before he could respond, my phone buzzed. It was a text from Clem. Time's running out, sis. What's it going to be? A surge of anger swept through me, anger at Marlon for his lies, at Clem for her manipulation, and at myself for being caught in the crossfire. Grabbing my keys, I headed for the door. Amity, wait. Marlon called after me. Where are you going? To end this, I snapped, barely glancing back. Once and for all. I drove to Clem's house, my mind racing the entire way. When she opened the door, her smug expression only fueled my determination. Well, she said, her tone dripping with mockery. Changed your mind already? I pushed past her without hesitation. We need to talk, Clem. No more games. No more threats. She followed me into the living room, where Silas sat, looking both confused and concerned. Amity, what's going on? He asked. I turned to face them, my resolve hardening. It's time for the truth to come out. All of it. Over the next hour, I laid everything bare. I told them about Dad's secret philanthropy, his dream of a foundation, and the hidden accounts he'd left behind. I even revealed Marlon's past, despite the pain it caused me to say it aloud. Silas listened in stunned silence, while Clem's face shifted from shock to anger to something almost unrecognizable, something that looked like shame. And that's the legacy Dad left us, I said, my voice raw. Not just money, but a chance to be better than we've been. A chance to make a real difference. Clem let out a scoff, but it lacked her usual venom. So what? She said, her voice quiet but sharp. You want me to give up my share to go along with Dad's little charity dream? I shook my head.
No, Clem.
I want you to be honest with Silas, with yourself, about why you're so desperate for this money. The room fell into silence. Silas turned to Clem, his expression serious. Clem, what is she talking about? For a moment, Clem's walls crumbled. The vulnerability I'd glimpsed before returned, and this time, it overwhelmed her. Tears filled her eyes, spilling down her face as the truth she'd been hiding threatened to come to light. I messed up, okay? Clem finally admitted, her voice breaking as tears streamed down her face. I got in over my head with some investments. I thought I could fix it before anyone found out, but it just kept spiraling out of control. Hearing the truth left me with a strange mix of vindication and sorrow. This was the sister I remembered, imperfect and vulnerable, not the cold and calculating woman she had become. For the first time in years, I saw a glimpse of the Clem I had grown up with. Silas moved toward her, his face softening as if he wanted to offer comfort, but Clem pulled back sharply. "Don't," she said, her voice trembling. "I don't deserve it. I've ruined everything." I took a deep breath, knowing the moment was fragile, and that my next words could either deepen the divide between us or begin to bridge it.
No, Clem.
"You haven't ruined everything. Not yet. But what you do next, how you choose to handle this, that's what matters now." The three of us sat there in silence for what felt like hours. The weight of the truth and the years of unspoken pain between us filled the room. I realized this was the real challenge. More than money, more than the secrets Dad had left behind. This was about whether we could find a way to move forward as a family. Could we rebuild, not just our relationships, but the legacy Dad had entrusted to us? That answer would shape everything, from the fate of his dreams to the bonds that held us together. The tension in the living room was palpable. Clem sat hunched on the couch, her face buried in her hands, while Silas paced the floor, his movements tense and frustrated. "How could you do this, Clem?" Silas demanded, his voice tight with anger. "All those reckless investments, the lies. Do you even understand what this means for us?" Clem looked up at him, her eyes rimmed with red. "I was trying to fix it, Silas. I thought if I could just pull off one big win, everything would be okay." I stayed silent, watching the scene unfold. Seeing Clem so exposed, her life unraveling before my eyes, brought no satisfaction, only a deep sadness for what had been lost along the way. "Fix it," Silas shot back, his voice rising. "You've ruined everything. The company, our reputation, it's all gone." As Silas continued to vent his frustration, I noticed a subtle shift in Clem. The raw vulnerability she had shown moments before began to fade, replaced by a calculating glint in her eyes. She straightened, her tone sharpening. "It's not all gone," Clem said, her voice measured. She turned to me, her expression almost daring. "Tell him, Amity. Tell him about Dad's fortune." My chest tightened, panic rising. "Clem, don't." But she was already pressing forward, her desperation spilling out in every word. "Dad left a hidden fortune, Silas. Millions of dollars, sitting in secret accounts. He wanted to waste it on some ridiculous charity idea, but it's family money. It belongs to us." Silas froze mid-step, his gaze darting between Clem and me. "Is that true?" he asked, his tone heavy with suspicion. I felt the weight of the moment settle on my shoulders. I couldn't lie, but I also couldn't let Clem twist the truth. Taking a deep breath, I answered, "Yes, it's true. But it's not what you think, Silas. This isn't just a pile of money to spend. Dad had a vision. He wanted to help people. That's what the money was meant for." Clem let out a bitter laugh, her voice dripping with sarcasm. "Oh, give it a rest, Amity. You're not fooling anyone with your noble act. You just want to keep it all for yourself, to play the hero, while I'm left with nothing." "That's not true," I shot back, anger flaring in my chest. "I've tried to help you, Clem. I've offered to find a way forward, but this isn't the answer. Dad's legacy isn't a get-out-of-jail-free card to fix your mistakes." Silas raised a hand, his expression dark and resolute. "Enough," he said, his voice firm. "Clem, I need to know exactly how bad things are. Show me everything." Reluctantly, Clem pulled out a folder stuffed with financial documents and began to explain the full extent of her mismanagement. As she spoke, the enormity of her situation became clear. My phone buzzed in my pocket, breaking my concentration. It was a text from Marlon. "Where are you? We need to talk." I sighed, feeling the weight of everything pressing down on me. Clem's recklessness, Silas's frustration, Marlon's betrayal. It was all too much. But deep down, I knew this was the crossroads. What we chose to do next would either salvage what remained of our family or destroy it forever. I stepped out of the room, my thoughts swirling. How had we reached this point? A family that had once been so close was now splintered by secrets, lies, and mistrust. I took a moment to steady myself before heading back inside. When I returned, the atmosphere had shifted. Silas stood by the window, his shoulders slumped in quiet resignation. Clem sat at the dining table, surrounded by papers, her face unreadable, a mixture of defeat and despair. "I've seen enough," Silas said, his voice heavy with finality. "Clem, I'm sorry, but I can't do this anymore. I'm calling my lawyer in the morning. We're done." Clem's head snapped up, her eyes wide with panic. "Silas, please, don't give up on us. We can fix this. With the money from Dad's estate." "No," he interrupted firmly. "That's not an option. The foundation is going forward, just like your father wanted. I won't be a part of anything that goes against his wishes." For a moment, I thought Clem might explode with anger, but instead, the fight seemed to drain out of her. She slumped back in her chair, her voice barely audible. "Then what am I supposed to do? I've lost everything." I moved closer, sitting beside her. For the first time in years, I felt a spark of the sisterly bond we used to share. "Not everything, Clem. You still have us. You still have family. But you have to be willing to make things right. You have to be honest, not just with us, but with yourself." Silas cleared his throat, his voice gentler now. "Amity's right. Your father left this fortune for a purpose. Maybe it can help you too, but not by simply handing it over. We need to honor his legacy, to use it for something greater." As we sat together, the beginning of a plan took shape. For the first time, it felt like we might have a chance, not just to repair our family, but to build something meaningful. It wouldn't be easy. It would demand sacrifice, honesty, and trust, things that had been missing from our lives for far too long. Later, as I stood outside the cabin, the autumn breeze rustled through the trees, carrying with it a sense of renewal. My hand rested on my growing belly as I looked out at the changing leaves. 6 months had passed since that day when our family's carefully guarded secrets had come crashing down, and everything had changed. Marlon appeared beside me, slipping an arm around my shoulders. "Penny for your thoughts?" he asked softly. I leaned into him, grateful for his steady presence. "I was just thinking about how far we've all come. How much has changed, and how much we've changed with it." From inside, the sound of laughter floated out to us, warm and inviting. I smiled at the sight of Mom and Clem in the kitchen, working together to prepare dinner, a scene I couldn't have imagined just a few months earlier. "Are you ready for this?" Marlon asked, his voice gentle but steady. I took a deep breath and nodded. "As ready as I'll ever be." We stepped inside to find Silas setting the table, his movements calm and purposeful. The cabin, once a place of neglect and secrets, now hummed with life and purpose. Dad's dream of a charitable foundation had come to life, and each of us had found a role in making it happen. Clem looked up as we entered, her expression softer than I'd seen in years. "Just in time," she said with a small smile. "Dinner's almost ready." We gathered around the table, a family transformed. Clem, humbled by her mistakes, had found new purpose working tirelessly for the foundation. Silas, though no longer her husband, had become an invaluable advisor, determined to support the vision Dad had left behind. And Marlon, having confronted his past and sought forgiveness, was more open and present than ever before. As we raised our glasses, Mom's voice carried through the room, strong and full of emotion. "I'd like to propose a toast," she said, her eyes shining with unshed tears. "To Reed, whose legacy brought us together in ways we never could have imagined." The clinking of glasses echoed through the cabin, and for the first time in what felt like forever, I felt a sense of peace. Dad's dream had become a reality, not just in the foundation we'd built, but in the family we were working to rebuild. We raised our glasses, the weight of the past few months lingering between us, a silent acknowledgement of how far we had come. The atmosphere was warm, filled with a tentative sense of hope. "I need to say something," Clem said, her voice softer than I'd ever heard it. Her gaze met mine, her eyes shimmering with unshed tears. "Amity, I owe you an apology. For everything." I was so consumed by my own problems, my own greed, that I lost sight of what really matters. Reaching across the table, I took her hand in mine. "We've all made mistakes, Clem. What matters is that we're here now, working to make things right." Silas cleared his throat, breaking the silence. "I have some news," he said with a small smile. "The Foundation's first major project is ready to launch. Next month, we'll be breaking ground on the community center." Excitement rippled through the room. This was the culmination of everything Dad had envisioned, his fortune being used to bring real change to people's lives. As the conversation grew lively, I suddenly felt a gentle but unmistakable kick from the baby. A gasp escaped my lips, and all eyes turned to me. "Amity, are you okay?" Marlon asked, his concern immediate. I nodded, unable to stop the happy tears from falling. "I'm more than okay. I think Dad would be proud of us." Mom reached over, her hand squeezing mine tightly. "He always was sweetheart. And he'd be over the moon about becoming a grandfather." Later that evening, I found myself stepping out onto the porch. The sun was setting over the trees, casting a golden glow across the landscape. The air was cool, and the faint hum of laughter and voices drifted out from the cabin behind me. Marlon joined me a moment later, wrapping a blanket over my shoulders. "What are you thinking about now?" he asked, his voice soft. I turned to him, my heart full. "The future," I replied. "The family we're building. The legacy we're creating together." Marlon placed his hand gently on my belly, his touch steady and comforting. "Our little one is going to have quite the story to grow up with." I chuckled softly. "They certainly will. But more importantly, they'll grow up surrounded by a family that's learned the value of honesty, forgiveness, and working together for something bigger than ourselves." We stood there in comfortable silence, the cabin behind us brimming with life and the promise of tomorrow stretching out before us. I felt an overwhelming sense of gratitude for Dad's final gift, not just the money, but the chance to heal, to rebuild, and to rediscover what family truly means. The journey had been painful, marked by betrayal and hard truths. But as I rested a hand on my belly, feeling the life growing inside me, I knew it had all been worth it. We had faced our demons, confronted our past, and come out stronger. As the first stars began to the twilight sky, I whispered softly, "Thank you, Dad." His unfinished dream had become our new beginning, a legacy of love, hope, and the strength to face whatever challenges lay ahead.